Hello, today we're going to look at how to write better summaries and be more concise in your writing. Today we're going to look at something called Chekov's gun. Chekhov's gun is a literary technique a lot of writers use in order to decide which details are important and which ones aren't. So what is it exactly? Chekhov's gun is a term coined by the Russian playwright Anton Chekhov. He said, "If in the first act you have hung a pistol on the wall, then in the following one it should be fired. Otherwise, don't put it there." Now let's look at an example where Chekhov's gun is used in a story. Let's say that there's a play and in Act 1, two friends go out for lunch. At the house that they're eating at, there's a gun framed on the wall. In Act 2, they start to argue. By Act 3, friend A has broken the glass of the frame, taken the gun, and shot friend B. In this story, the gun is a literal version of Chekhov's gun. But what makes it that? Remember that Chekhov's guns are details that are vital to the story. Here, this gun is being used to drive the plot forward. The gun changes from a decoration on the wall to something that's shot and therefore shapes the narrative. Hence, it's an important detail that we can't get rid of. Let's look at Chekhov's gun being used in a written story. Here's a very basic story. A friend of mine bought a Rolex. He was standing on the street bragging about it. A car rushed by and hit his arm off. He screamed, "My watch." Here, the Rolex acts as a form of Chekhov's gun because it's a detail that we expand upon when we discover that when he loses his arm, he's more concerned with his watch rather than his actual limb. Here's an important note, however. Not all details have to relate to Chekhov's gun. Some important details describe who, what, when, where, and why, and also sometimes how. These details are still important because they help the reader picture the image in their mind. Let's look at a more fleshed out version of the story. A friend of mine just recently bought a Rolex, a new suit, and a Ferrari. It was about 2 p.m. and we just finished having lunch at a street side cafe. He was standing in the middle of the road, bragging about his new watch, when suddenly, a car rushed by and hit his arm off. He yelled, "My watch!" Here, like before, the Rolex acts as a form of Chekhov's gun. 2 p.m. is also important because it helps set the when of the story. It helps the reader picture the time of day. Same thing with lunch at a street side cafe. Not only does this detail help establish the setting of the story, but it also helps to explain why exactly he's in the road in the first place when the car hits him. On the other hand, a new suit and a Ferrari both violate Chekhov's gun. They're not expanded or mentioned anywhere else in the story, so therefore we should eliminate them. To show how this works in summaries, let's write our own summary. For now, we'll choose My Hero Academia. Here's a very basic summary of the story. Izuku wants to be a superhero because he looks up to All Might. But he was born quirkless. One day, he's attacked by a villain, but is saved by All Might. Afterwards, All Might decides to pass his power on to Izuku. Now, Izuku can enroll at a hero school. Here, the important detail that I included was that he was born quirkless, because I expanded upon it later on by saying that All Might passed his power onto him. Now note that the story is very complex, so I left out details even though they are technically important to the story. I left out the story about Katsuki, his childhood friend, because for the purpose of my summary, I didn't expand upon it, so therefore I didn't need to mention it. So the key takeaway here is that using these techniques will help you create concise and cohesive stories and by extension, summaries.